Hey everyone, hope you're doing well out there. Do hope that to whoever watches this, it does support and help someone in some way, as I think it is important and solutions to what's happening in the world and how we can actually come back to living in harmony with nature, with each other, and living in love and peace in this world. So I'm going to just talk about the sins, vices, and virtues, as well as how we unconsciously and consciously consent to these in our daily lives, whether through thoughts, feelings, or manipulation from someone else, and our actions, and just talk about solutions on how we can purify and create awareness of these things and actually shift into that virtuous state and into that divine energy within all of us and awaken to the soul beings that we are. And to really, hopefully provide some solutions on how to break free from ignorance in this world. The sins and the virtues. So the sins will be pride, greed, lust, wrath, gluttony, envy, and sloth. And the virtues will be humility, generosity, charity, chastity, patience, temperance, and diligence. There's other things I want to add to that as well in terms of virtues. Would be purity, wisdom, justice, fortitude, courage, bravery, faith, selflessness, generosity, loving kindness, compassion, truth, honor, honesty, righteousness, and protection of the innocent. And also to add onto some of the sins would also be vice. Vice is essentially just wicked deeds and wicked behaviors, whether that's unconsciously or consciously. The world around us that we externally see is a reflection of what's happening within us, in our inner worlds, on an individual and a collective level, as we are all connected. So basically, the manifested reality before us is due to living in ignorance, is due to living in sin and vices, whether that's unconsciously or consciously. And the way that this world gets manifested is through those things. So essentially, the more that we stay in these things, it chains us down to these lower states of consciousness, to these lower states of being. It allows us to be controlled and manipulated by, something else in a sense, because we don't have that awareness, that intelligence, and that evolution to actually see the truth of what's going on, because we are living in ignorance. And the more we do these sins and vices, whether that's unconsciously or consciously, it invites more of those lower frequency demons, those entities that feed off these lower habits into it. It acts as a doorway into this reality to amplify and make more of it. So we seriously need to be working to purify ourselves and dissolve these sins and vices and actually come into virtue. And it's just so important for the times we're in right now. In every single moment, we do have a choice. We have a choice of if we want to choose, I guess you could say, those egoic qualities, or the things that attach to sin and sensory desires and those needless gratifications, or can we break free from that and choose, the God within us, virtue, purity, the angelic energies that we all have within ourselves. So it really comes down to that. There's so many layers to this, and I think the more we can observe ourselves in every single day consciously of what's happening within ourselves, are we being selfless or selfish in a sense? What are the actions that I'm doing? What are the thoughts that I'm thinking that's binding me into these lower states of being, into this state of ignorance in a sense? And what do I need to do to actually break free from that? So the more we ask these questions and observe ourselves in every single day, the more we can start to shift things. I feel a good example is one of the sins called greed. So am I taking more of that which I don't need? And as human beings, we don't need that much to actually live and survive. And they say simplicity is the way to attain into higher states of consciousness as well. So are we taking more of the things that we don't actually need? Are we just taking things from others? And the more we do that, the more it actually binds us into more pain and suffering without us, whether we realize it or not. It does it anyway, because it's like a perpetual motion. Showing that kindness to others by giving them things that they don't have, or the things that someone else might need more than us, whether that's a human or an animal. Those are just examples that we can just be aware of in our day-to-day lives, regardless of what other people are doing. If someone else is choosing to be these things, it doesn't mean you have to choose that. It's choice right now to choose. So, you know, same with, for example, sloth. Are we being lazy and, you know, developing apathy towards things and not doing anything? Or can we move into diligence and actually do persistent and constant work in a good way that's going to help the world and actually, you know, change our vibrational frequencies and shift the vibrational frequencies of this planet? You know, stuff like that. You know, instead of envy, we can move into actually loving the fact that that person is actually doing well in their lives, rather than being like, I want what they have, you know. And just sending them love for the things that they've accomplished in a good way. So I think it's important right now that we create awareness of these sins and all these virtues, knowing when to forgive, you know, knowing when to apply loving kindness, you know, always being honest and truthful, protecting the innocent, protecting what is sacred, standing up to actually protect what is sacred in this world, you know, and actually developing the courage to do these things. The courage to do these things. And, you know, wisdom is so important within all these things, because any civilization that are truly wise beings, will also be enlightened and have no ignorance. So with that wisdom, we can actually consciously apply things in a healthy way. We know all the courses of action, and we can consciously apply that in a healthy way for the greater good of everyone who wishes to live in harmony and peace and love. You know, another thing I want to share is also in Ashtanga Yoga, there's the yamas and niyamas, which are internal and external ethics. So the external ethics are non-harming, benevolent, non-stealing, responsibility, unity, generosity. And the niyamas, the internal ethics, is purity, contentment, discipline, self-study, and surrender to the divine. And I think these are also very important as well. Essentially, generating that knowledge from within, so we can actually have a better interpretations of what these moral guidelines, these core values are. You know, for example, non-harming, it also means to actually stop the innocent from being harmed. So if you see someone harming the innocent, then it's to stop that from actually happening and protect the innocent. You know, that's another way of looking at it. Same with, it's interesting enough, chastity in a sense. So from my perspective, as well as many people in spiritual communities, they actually would say that, you know, the true meaning of chastity is to stop having sex through lust. So instead, we're making love. So if we truly love the other person, then we move from lust and into making love with the other person and having a beautiful union with them in that way. And to even go deeper would be applying white tantra, which is just you're making love to someone. It has to be true love though, and there has to be no ejaculation, and through that you can actually tap into higher states of consciousness. Really important that we have awareness of all these things in our daily lives. So one thing I find that can help a lot is just simply just pausing and breathing. Often we get caught up with, you know, the rat race in the world, you know, the jobs that we're working at. But instead, if we can just center ourselves, take a deep breath, and just ask ourselves, what would love do right now? What would this certain ascended master would do right now? And actually, you know, embody those attributes, and then act in accordance with those qualities. the more we do this, the more we will transmute these lower vibrational frequencies into higher energies within ourselves and actually create purity and healthy ways of living within ourselves and externally. So it's very important as well that we do these things if we wish to change ourselves, and if we wish to change the world around us, because we're all in this together, and there's a lot of work to be done in this world. There's a lot of healing to be done. The more we ask ourselves these questions in our daily lives, eventually gets to the point, the more we do repetition and stay consistent with it, it crystallizes into us, into our psyche, into our embodiment. We reprogram ourselves in accordance with the divine within ourselves. The more we do this, eventually gets to the point where we won't even have to ask the question anymore, because it will be embodied fully within us, and everything we do, everything we think, feel, act will be a byproduct of virtue, purity, of that divine nature that's inherent and that's within every single human, for we are soul beings. It's interesting as well, just to quickly chat about, temptations and the Adam and Eve eating the apple story. However we look at it, whatever perspective we want to go with it, it's interesting because, the apple representing that temptation, and the apple being, looking nice and juicy, but if the apple was rotten, no one's going to eat it, right? So that's why the apple looks nice and juicy, the apple representing temptation. So things in our lives can seem very tempting to us, very tempting, and it's up to us to resist those temptations, that the ones that are unhealthy to the core, even if they appear and look good. A good example of this would be, gluttony, constantly overeating foods and being attached to that taste of the food and constantly just overeating. But can we actually resist the temptation of those tastes and actually just only eat the foods that we need to survive and use it as a tool for sustenance? So that's just an example. There's many ways you could apply the resisting the temptation to all the sins. And to sin is to miss the mark. And nothing misses the mark like forgetting we are soul and being entrapped into lower states of consciousness. The more we have those qualities within ourselves, if we have those sins and vices, qualities within ourselves, it's going to amplify and ripple out into the world. But the more we become pure, virtuous, the more we can change everything within ourselves and the external world around us. The more we will become enlightened, the more we will break free from ignorance and move into, wisdom, and move from slavery into freedom. Because any beings who are evolved and are enlightened and wise will actually see more layers of the truth and what's really going on. Essentially makes a species like that cannot be controlled. It is also important that I feel that we do meditation. So the thing about meditation, meditation essentially can help us go into our unconscious and subconscious mind and all the habitual patterns that are within that manifest in our physical conscious mind, in our reality around us. So the things we can be aware of, consciously, but sometimes we need to go deeper within into the subconscious, unconscious, and really get it at the roots of where it is, and dissolve that energy, dissolve those sins and vices that are deep in those roots, and purify ourselves from those things. So that's why I would say meditation is so important, to go deeper within ourselves and to find things and explore the things within ourselves that we can't consciously see right now. So that essentially what meditation can do and can help us with. Because we will find out things about ourselves that we didn't even realize, the beautiful things and the silly things to say. And so once we go within and observe ourselves within that, we then can let go of those things and then create healthier habits that are in alignment with, virtue and purity, and truly change our lives and the world around us. I'm going to talk about how we consent on a daily basis, how we unconsciously consent to these sins and vices on a daily basis. Be very simple and clear with this. There are humans who, manipulate us to get us to unconsciously consent, and they have a malicious intent to do that. Then there are also other humans who don't have that malicious intent, but they still do these things because they're still programmed in this world, in this society. Because they're still programmed in this world, in society, they're still doing these things, and it spreads out and it spreads out and it becomes the normal thing, as the system is filled with distractions. And then there's also the non-human entities that have malicious intentions as well. It's trying to get us to adapt to their mindset, adapt to their programming and the constructs of what they want us to think, feel, and see. They pretty much bend our will, our thoughts and emotions in accordance to their will, in accordance to what they desire for us. And that's, essentially the people who are intentionally doing it, to say. And once we give into that energy, then they've got us. Then we're starting to adapt to their mindset. Our energies are being manipulated to think, feel, see, and do, and act in accordance to their will without even realizing. And sometimes it feels like you're hypnotized without even realizing, because it's so subtle. I'll give you an example of this. Just an example that I hope is going to be clear. So someone, you're talking to someone, for example, and this guy or this girl makes a joke about harming another human, but does it in a jokeful way, and just making a joke. What essentially is happening there, if they're aware of this and they have a malicious intent, what they're essentially trying to do, they're trying to get the reaction out of you. So whether you can, they're trying to get a reaction out of you in a sense that's gonna unconsciously consent to the joke they are making. So if someone makes a joke about harming someone and they laugh, and then you laugh, and you continue to laugh as well. Once you do that, once you're agreeing to that, even just through laughing with that, that's when they've got you. That's when they're adapting you to their mindset in such a subtle way you wouldn't realize. Now, deep within, we have our conscience and we're like, oh, that's not actually funny, but we might laugh out of embarrassment or something like that, or because we're not staying strong in our heart. So that's essentially one way. So once they've got you like that, they're feeding off your energy, they're absorbing that energy, stealing that energy, and then it's also binding us into the lower states of consciousness, those lower states of thinking, feeling, being, and the things that we do. And all of a sudden we go off and do something that wouldn't really be in alignment with our soul, because we're constantly being programmed and conditioned to all of these traps, these illusions, these distractions. And that's the reaction they're trying to get out of people. So that's what they're really trying to get out of people, in a sense, the ones who are trying to do that, because it binds us into more sin, more vice, because anyone who is truly wise, who has the awareness, isn't going to laugh in accordance to that. If we were truly an enlightened species and we were truly wise, we wouldn't be making jokes about that or laughing about that in any way. So that's just an example. There's so many layers you could apply this to, and it's so subtle. It's so subtle. So one needs to be aware to stop giving their energy away to the energy vampires, to say. Again, this comes back to the non-human entities who are doing this, the humans who are intentionally, maliciously doing this, as well as the humans who are accidentally doing this without even realizing, because they're also in the program. And a lot of the time, that's a lot of the masses. People have good hearts and want to do good, but sometimes they're in that program, so they're doing these things that aren't in alignment, in a sense, aren't in alignment with the soul and aren't in alignment with true wisdom. You need to be aware and be strong in the heart and stand our ground and be aware. You know, just not giving them a reaction like that. Just breathe and just stay strong. You know, other ways they do that, they observe our weaknesses and our strengths, and they play and manipulate on that. Sometimes it's lessons. A lot of the time it is lessons that we need to learn. You know, a lot of people say this world is a school, the lessons we need to return into the higher heavenly realm. And I feel that is true. A lot of the time it is lessons. But then there's also other times where, just say you've learned the lesson, but there's still some, you know, demonic entity that's really trying to manipulate you and try to poke at a wound or try to just tether you down into the lower state of consciousness. And the more you give in to that, the more it invites them in. When you embody that holy, divine, angelic light, some would even say they run from that light. And a lot of this manipulation is so we actually stay in sin. The more we stay in the sin and vices, it gives them power. It gives our energy away to them so they can survive off our energy. And it sustains this illusion, this Maya, this illusion that we literally, all of us are in. The things they do is, the more you awaken your spirituality in a conscious and good and healthy way, I guess you could say, sometimes they will even offer you financial freedom in certain marketing businesses. And again, a lot of these marketing businesses are very linked to ego. They will try to get people that way, to bind people into those lower states of consciousness by offering them financial freedom through marketing businesses and all that stuff. So it's up to us to be aware of these things and to actually, you know, break free. We unconsciously consent to all these things that I just mentioned and so much more. We're given it power, and then, you know, it's binding us into that. I'm aware of these things in every single moment. We need to do the practices, any spiritual practices that works for you the best. Find that, do that, stay within that. You know, be a good person, do good deeds, be virtuous, embody this. The more we're aware, the more we will embody that, and the less unwanted karma we have to deal with. You know, the less ego the more ego we dissolve. Another way they adapt us to their mindset is through TVs, movies, all those things. There's another way. Even though they put a lot of truth in the movies and TV shows, that's another way of how they can get us to unconsciously consent to what they are attempting to manipulate us towards. Once we become aware of these things, it's up to us to do the right thing and to no longer give it energy, to no longer do those things, to no longer consent. That's how we start to break free. That's how we start to tap into the divine energy within every single one of us. You're going off in your daily life and you know something that just is not good for you, that really isn't good for you. It's important that we ask ourselves, who, you know, do we wish to change? Do we wish to align ourselves with our soul? And then to stop doing those things that are not good for us, that are not healthy for us, and to actually let go of that. So it's important that we do these practices to start to purify our being, purify ourselves and everything around us, and awaken our spirituality, our consciousness in a healthy, good way. It is so important that we do these things in order to actually rise into our true nature. Another thing I want to talk about is, as well, just quickly, is the Serenity Prayer. So the Serenity Prayer, the modified version that I prefer and I think is so important, it goes something like this. God, give me the grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed, and the courage to change the things which must and should be changed, and the wisdom to distinguish the one from the other. So important as well, because I think the more we start to embody these beautiful virtuous qualities, the more we're going to want to actually change what's happening in this world. So the things that we cannot change, for example, are natural law. I'm not going to explain what natural law is now. I highly recommend you look into that because it's so important. But essentially what it is, it's They are principles and codes that are inherent to creation, inherent to the universe. And those are the things that cannot be changed. They apply throughout all of the universe. And the way this world is being constructed right now, it's not in alignment with natural law. It's more in alignment with man-made law. And having the courage to change the things which should and must be changed, which is essentially a lot of what's happening in the world right now. A lot of evil tyrants manipulating this world, manipulating and influence humanity, who aren't living in alignment with natural law. So those are the things that must and should be changed. Have the courage to stand against the face of evil and do something about it, and actually change those things that has to be changed in this world. And we can say that past civilizations over time have fallen due to living in sin, ego, and vice, because that's what perpetuates and keeps this thing from continuing, these endless cycles of suffering continuing. So that, again, the more we purify ourselves, the more we be virtuous, the more we can, qualify to actually, bring the heaven on earth, or at least when we pass, we ascend into a higher dimension, in a sense. However we want to look at it. So in Hindu spirituality, they say the wheel of samsara, which is we live in a dualistic realm, and we're constantly in the cycle of life, death, life, death, life, death, and having that reincarnation. And it's until we perform good deeds, good karma, is when we can break free from that cycle and rise into, the heavens, So that's what they believe in Hindu spirituality. So it's important that we actually embody those qualities here and do what we can here to change the things that must and should be changed, because it is all connected. The last thing I quickly want to talk about is it's referred to as the Trivium, and I think it's a pretty good method to look at. So just to quickly explain it, essentially what it means is the first stage is knowledge. The second stage is comprehension, or the processing of that knowledge. The third stage is wisdom, and the fourth stage is the manifested reality. So it's interesting, because some would even say that knowledge without wisdom is dangerous, and I actually do agree with that. So essentially, we acquire the knowledge, and then from there we process that information of what that knowledge is. Then from there we can consider all possibilities, all right courses of action, and take the right course of action to apply that knowledge in a healthy and conscious way for the greater good of everyone who wishes to live in harmony and peace and love. Now that is applying wisdom in a good way. And I think it's something to really look into. I think that's a really good way we can actually break free from ignorance as well. And again, coming back to, as we're acquiring that knowledge, the more we purify ourselves and awaken our consciousness in a good and healthy way, the more we're going to be open up to knowledge, but also divine knowledge in a sense. So like all spectrums of knowledge, to say, and generate that knowledge from within, because as a society, we have been conditioned to generate it externally, but we got to learn to generate that knowledge from within. So from there, once we apply all these things, once we apply wisdom, we then get the manifested reality, which is the world around us. It's really up to us if we want to choose slavery or freedom, if we want to stay in ignorance or become enlightened, because any civilization who are truly enlightened beings, they are operating from that state of wisdom. They see all layers of the truth, which means they can't be deceived or tricked, because they're too conscious and intelligent to be tricked and deceived, and they cannot be controlled or manipulated. So a part of this process is purifying ourselves, but then having the knowledge and applying that knowledge in a healthy and good way, which is where wisdom comes in, and that's when we get the manifested reality. So that's important it's an important thing to look at, of how we can evolve as a species and learn to come back to live in harmony with nature, to live in peace and love with each other, with the animals, with God. and it's it's a interesting times we are in right now, because what they're really trying to go for, they're really pushing for, you know, the total control, where they want everything run by artificial intelligence. And I mean like total tracking and monitoring in every single thing that you do, like, you know, microchipping people, all that stuff. They really want total control. So in order for us to stop that from happening, we need to apply all these principles of virtue, you know, the trivium, and become wise beings. Once we are wise and evolved, we've chosen freedom, we've chosen love, knowing when to choose these things, and then we won't allow ourselves to be manipulated or controlled by other entities that wish to enslave us, because we have become enlightened. So that's really, I feel, is going to be important to really, you know, stopping that AI reality that they want to install and create for everything, where they can really control, monitor and track us in every single thing they do. They want to take away free will completely. So yeah, it's up to us to do the work to change, and to actually yeah, really, again, really awaken our consciousness, awaken our spirituality in a purely good and healthy way. Share this with the world around us. Help others in any way that we can. Give, you know, spread awareness and solutions at the same time. So yeah, anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you all for watching, and take care.